Highbridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Vote with Your Phone. Why Mobile Voting is Our Final Shot at Saving Democracy. By Bradley Tusk. Read by Kyle Tait. Forward. After the shooting at my high school in Parkland, Florida, I was fucking enraged. I had learned in debate about gun policy and had to argue on both sides of the issue. I know that the reason the shooting happened was because of our corrupt system of government that legalized bribery via campaign donations by groups like the National Rifle Association, NRA. I was mad after the shooting because I felt guilty knowing that I could have been advocating long before for the policies I know could have prevented it, and also the epic failure of our leaders to do anything about gun violence. I remember thinking in middle school when I saw the news about Sandy Hook that something had to change, but it didn't. Now, in Florida, many thought we couldn't change anything because we were teenagers, and Florida was a Republican state. But we didn't listen and still tried. From that day until now, I know the number one thing we could do to prevent gun violence is make our democracy as accessible as possible, because the vast majority of the American people, including Floridians, support stronger gun laws. But a loud and immoral minority that is the gun lobby has subverted the people's will. What got us through it was an outpouring of love and support from our families and our community, and the support of millions upon millions of people from across the country and the world. Our pain connected with people across the world, and a new chapter of the movement to end gun violence was born from that connection. My classmates and I became the leaders of that new chapter. In the whirlwind of activism that followed the shooting, nearly 2 million people marched with us in Washington, D.C., and around the country. How did a group of high school activists, without connections, experience, money, or power, become the leaders of a movement that would shake the halls of Congress? What made the difference for us? Our phones. The school shooting generation was just barely old enough to speak out, but Gen Z is the most connected generation in history. We grew up with phones that connected us to each other, and to the older generations directly and personally. A new movement was born, in Facebook groups and Twitter conversations, on Instagram and TikTok. Maybe we shouldn't have been surprised. After all, people of all ages have been talking, texting, emailing, banking, grocery shopping, dating, and more on their phones for years. It's not just Gen Z. Practically everyone trusts their phones to connect them safely and securely to the world. It's time for the digital revolution to continue, to level the playing field and expand our democracy. Hundreds of millions of people communicate, organize, and conduct financial transactions on their phones. Now, it's time to have voting on our phones as an option. Mobile voting could be a catalyst for creating a democracy where voting is accessible and inclusive, and keeping up with the technology of our generation. In the 2020 election, about 80 million eligible voters didn't cast their vote. This was an election with the highest turnout since 1900, yet millions remained unheard. Imagine a democracy where the voting booth is at the fingertips of every eligible voter. A democracy where everyday Americans are unburdened by the limitations of physical polling stations and long lines. Right now, voting just isn't accessible. As voting currently stands, the challenges of accessibility are painfully evident. Americans in every city and state experience the taxing struggle of balancing work shifts and long waits to exercise their democratic right to vote, and young voters are particularly impacted. The impact of mobile voting on voter turnout would be revolutionary. We're talking about a world where casting your vote is as simple as sending a text. If your polling site is in your pocket, the inconveniences of going to vote disappear. It turns the act of voting into a seamless part of our day, increasing the participation of every citizen, especially young people, in shaping the policies and leadership of our nation. But we're not just going to adapt to the status quo. We're changing it. Automatic voter registration is happening across the country and the world, and it's about time. Here in the United States, states like Pennsylvania, which in September 2023 implemented automatic voter registration when a resident gets their driver's license, are setting a precedent for how we can expand our democratic system and make voting more accessible. If the government has the ability to send draft cards when you turn 18 and securely maintains the tax information of every citizen, automatic voter registration should be a given in our modern society. The discrepancy between our technological progress and our outdated voting system is a glaring contradiction we cannot afford to ignore. We live in an era dominated by technology, from organizing marches to handling our finances. If banking systems, which deal with our economic lifelines, can be securely operated via our cell phones, the prospect of mobile voting becomes not just plausible, but imperative. If our actions can be securely authenticated for sensitive transactions, there's no conceivable reason why our votes can't be similarly safeguarded. The security concerns surrounding mobile voting are important, and we should only implement such a system if we can guarantee it's secure. What is clear is that if we built it securely, mobile voting can be as secure and as convenient as everyday online activities such as online banking, healthcare, and transportation. Testing grounds for mobile voting in 7 states have already demonstrated its feasibility, with people with disabilities and the military using this system successfully. The realization of an end-to-end verifiable mobile voting technology, available freely to any jurisdiction, is within our grasp. We are at a pivotal point, with outdated excuses becoming intolerable. We need to unite our voices for a democracy that genuinely mirrors the technological advances our society has made. Plus, this isn't a battle between Democrats and Republicans. It's about reshaping a democracy where every voice counts. It's about communities everywhere having equal say in who represents us and what policies are prioritized. It's about a leveled playing field where every vote has equal weight and gerrymandering doesn't get the final say. Mobile voting will also revolutionize access to the ballot for rural communities and working people, irrespective of one's political affiliation, reducing travel constraints and promoting universal participation. The objective is simple: to create a system where the best argument wins, not whoever has the most convenient voting location. As Gen Z, we need to debunk stereotypes about our political apathy and address the reluctance to adapt our systems. Youth turnout in recent elections has already broken records. Now, our call for change is a collective desire for a fairer and more representative political landscape. It's time to break free from outdated systems and embrace the digital era. The future of politics can be a realm where every voice is heard, every vote is counted, and every individual matters. In 2018, after the deadly massacre at my high school that changed so many lives forever, I knew that the only thing I could do was scare the fuck out of the corrupt politicians on the left and right, who failed for decades to act on gun violence. I knew that we had to stand up against the gun lobby and vote NRA puppets, whether left or right, out of office. Sad but true, there were and are still some on the left. While we've been marching and mobilizing for the last 5 years, we also have the power and technology to create something that will ensure every person can do the one thing that makes a difference: vote. I know from my experience that the only good politician is a scared one. The best way to bring our democracy back from the brink is to make it as accessible as possible to the American people through systems like mobile voting and automatic voter registration. So the only special interest politicians care about is the people's interest. By embracing mobile voting, we are not just advocating for technological advancement. We are fortifying our commitment to a democracy that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. Mobile voting is not a distant dream. It's an attainable reality, and it's not going away. David Hogg, co-founder and president, Leaders We Deserve. Co-founder and board member, March for Our Lives. Part 1. The system is very, very broken. Chapter 1. Why things feel so bad, and what we can do about it. If you're listening to this book, you're probably pretty up to speed with the state of the world. And anyone up to speed with the state of the world probably feels screwed. I don't blame you. Everything feels terrible right now. Climate change is causing massive upheaval everywhere. Mass shootings keep happening over and over again, and no one does anything about it. Our schools aren't preparing kids adequately for college or the workforce. Our healthcare system is wildly expensive, while millions still lack basic coverage. We have no idea what to do with the influx of migrants crossing the border. We don't know how to stop them from entering the country, or what to do with them once they're here. And yet, at the same time, we have a country getting older and older, meaning we need new, younger taxpayers to make sure the boomers get their Social Security and Medicare. If we just turned the illegal immigrants into legal taxpayers, we'd solve the problem. Many of our bridges and roads are crumbling before our eyes. Mental health, especially among teens, is worse than ever. And while we know how toxic the internet can be, we don't have the political will to take even basic steps that can make it safer. And to top it all off, we live in a 24/7 world of constant information, constant contact, constant breaking news, which means we're getting pummeled relentlessly with bad stuff all the time. Here's the final insult. Our political system is completely, devastatingly broken. And because of this, there's no way right now to fix any of these problems. Occasionally, one political party can muster enough votes to pass some kind of meaningful legislation. But mainly, we're stuck in one of two worlds. A, total gridlock where everyone just fights and nothing gets done. Think Congress. Or B, legislative bodies controlled completely by ideological extremes on either side, who pass laws that are often patently insane. Think the laws from the state of Texas that allow teachers to walk into the classroom armed, or laws from the state of California requiring gender-neutral displays of toys and toothbrushes in department store windows. Either way, nothing gets better. The good news is, there is a solution to all of this. That's what this book is about. The reason I'm writing it is to persuade you that there is one way we can fix our democracy: mobile voting. Typically, young people have organized around radical causes: civil rights, women's rights, the anti-war movement. But today, almost incredibly, the most radical possibility is finding common ground. The next great reform will come from pushing the country into the middle and forcing our government to become competent and functional again. Virtually every American at this point has a smartphone in their pocket. It has become a utility, not a luxury. If we bring voting to where the people are, to where technology already is, we can exponentially increase voter turnout. Politicians make choices solely based on what it will take to win the next election. If only a small, extreme group of voters participate, their policies are extreme as a result, and nothing gets done. If a larger group of voters participates, it will reflect the mainstream, which means that to keep their jobs, politicians need to do what most people want to see happen: cooperation, progress, and results. We can dramatically increase participation by letting people vote securely on their phones. That would change all of the inputs and all of the incentives that govern how our politicians act and what they support. And that's what leads to better policies, better laws, and a better future. So far, through our work at the Mobile Voting Project, we've been able to test the idea of voting on your phone in 7 different states: Colorado, Oregon, South Carolina, Utah, Virginia, Washington, and West Virginia. Working with relatively small but key groups to prove that the concept of being able to vote on your phone can work both securely and efficiently. Mobile voting is exactly what it sounds like: opening a secure app on your phone and choosing your candidates, just like you use your phone to transfer money, pay bills, talk to your doctor, arrange your love life, and everything else. If the banks can protect our money online, we can definitely protect people's votes during the few times a year they're cast. People with disabilities, as well as those deployed in the military, have already voted on their phones in real elections, without any issues whatsoever. And the team at the Mobile Voting Project has taken everything we've learned from those elections and put it toward the development of new mobile voting technology that will be available for free to any jurisdiction that wishes to use it. We can only materially increase turnout and create a mandate for consensus, compromise, and cooperation if we make voting far more accessible, if we can meet today's potential voters where they are. Bringing all of us into the democratic process is how we change everything. Make no mistake about it. Those in power are going to use every tool they have to block us. It doesn't matter what party they belong to. There is one cause and one cause only that unites all elected officials: staying in office. Almost everybody holding an elective office right now got there by working within the existing system. What in the world would make them take a chance on a new system? Only the utter determination and passion of people like you, who care enough to listen to a book like this. I spent the first 15 years of my career working directly in government and politics at the local, state, and federal levels, both in the executive branch and the legislature. I went to law school, so I have a decent grasp of how the judiciary functions. I've run political campaigns. I have seen how the system works and how the sausage is made from every angle. But it wasn't until I started working in tech that I saw the power of mobile voting. Between 2011 and 2015, I helped run campaigns to legalize Uber and ride-sharing across the United States. I don't know how much you know or care about how the taxi industry works, but let me tell you this. Before Uber arrived on the scene, this industry was as entrenched, corrupt, and as stagnant as it gets. The people who ran it liked it that way. They didn't care about customers, or drivers, or anybody but themselves. And the last thing they wanted was an upstart like Uber being permitted to compete with them. They had countless elected officials in their pocket, and they fought us at every pass. But we had one huge advantage. And it wasn't money or political favor. It was that when people used Uber, they really liked it. In fact, they vastly preferred it to the old taxi system. Our challenge, as Uber's political team, was how to channel this goodwill into a political force, to turn our customers into activists. So we took the one thing they all had in common, the Uber app on their phones, and turned it into an open line to their elected officials. With the press of a button, riders could make their views count. For example, In a New York City fight where Mayor Bill de Blasio tried to effectively shut down Uber by banning any new cars or drivers, our customers were presented with the usual array of choices: Uber X, Uber Black, Uber XL, but also a new option called de Blasio. This de Blasio mode informed riders that by capping the number of for-hire vehicles in the city, the proposed new law would mean a 25-minute wait time for rides, and then immediately connected them to the mayor and their city council member to oppose the bill. Both in New York City and nationwide, millions of people ultimately used the app to warn their elected officials not to take away Uber. It worked. The ease and simplicity of weighing in via the app changed the underlying politics of the issue and put Ubers on the streets of major American cities virtually overnight. Even as one of the architects of the plan, I could hardly believe how well it worked. It was an epiphany. I remember sitting in my office thinking, I bet all these people who are helping us win these campaigns never vote in most elections, especially most primaries. They couldn't tell you who their state senator is. They didn't vote in the primary for their representative in Congress, or the city council, or the county legislature. Why? Not because they don't care. Not because they're too lazy or apathetic to do anything. Clearly, based on the support they'd shown for Uber, they were willing to act on something when it mattered to them. It's just that the hassle of voting has eclipsed the tangible benefits, especially in primaries and races for lower offices. Think about what voting entails. You have to get up early or skip your lunch hour to venture out to what is probably an unfamiliar location, where there might be a line or some other delay or confusion. The technology itself is typically bulky and outmoded, unlike anything we use for any other activity. Voting takes you to a land forgotten by time, an experience that engenders little confidence or enthusiasm for our democracy. Given how actively we discourage people from voting, we really shouldn't complain about low turnout. It's only logical. Beyond participation being logistically difficult, voters often feel like their vote won't really change anything. They feel like the election is determined solely by powerful special interests, and they feel like the system is so rigged and so corrupt that nothing can help. What we're left with at the end of the day is a democracy dominated by the handful of registered voters who do turn out for primary elections. For example, in the 2022 congressional primaries, according to the Bipartisan Policy Center, Republican turnout was 10.6%. Democratic turnout was even worse, at 9.3%. This small minority of primary voters pick the nominees that the rest of us are then forced to choose between in the general elections. And these primary voters are not a good representation of the electorate. They skew to the hard left or the hard right. They're dominated by special interests, and the candidates they pick tend to reflect those characteristics. The Uber experience taught me that people are more than willing to engage if we give them tools that fit within the context of their lives. People manage their money on their phones. They manage their health care. They manage their families and their love lives. We can do pretty much anything on our phones except vote. Why? Because the people currently in power don't want us to. Anything that threatens their hold on elected office must immediately be stopped. It's not that our politicians are uniquely bad. They're just people who desperately need affirmation and validation. That's typically who runs for office. That's just human nature. It was likely the same thing in the Roman Senate, the Greek Senate, and everything before and after. The difference is that the way we elect people in the United States encourages the worst personality traits of our elected officials. We're cursed with a few unique causes that make U.S. politics especially bad. First, the tremendous amount of money in politics leads to endless negative campaigning, because negative ads are effective. Second, We have a winner-take-all electoral system, where unlike parliamentary democracies, there is very little room for different viewpoints or dissent from the party line. Third, our culture pioneered the notion that money or status matters more than anything else. And for most elected officials, winning office is the only way they'll ever gain power and influence. So winning office and winning at life become completely intertwined. It doesn't have to be that way. Human nature may be immutable, at least absent millions of years for evolution. But our laws are not the Ten Commandments. They're not written in stone. They're the product of the imagination, context, intelligence, and politics of any given situation. If we want better policies, if we want better laws, if we want better outcomes, we just have to be smarter about how we go about the process, both electorally and governmentally. I got into politics because I didn't want to lead an ordinary life. I didn't want to just get a good job as a lawyer or a banker or something, make a nice living, move to the suburbs, have 2.5 kids, and retire at 65 to play golf or rummy cube. I don't believe in reincarnation or an afterlife. To me, what we have right now is all we get. I wanted my existence to be more than just that of another person who comes and goes, without making an impact. That felt hollow, insufficient. And to me, when I was a young person starting out, working in government and in politics looked like the best way to have an impact. So I did. While still in college, I worked for Ed Rendell, the mayor of Philadelphia, spending most of my days at City Hall rather than in class, because it was much more fun and because it felt useful. After college, I took a job as spokesperson at the New York City Parks Department, working for Parks Commissioner Henry Stern, who was willing to do anything for attention. From him, I learned two things: how the media works, and perhaps more importantly, how the mind of a politician works. After that, I switched to the federal government, serving as communications director for U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer. Chuck, who later became the Senate Majority Leader, was an interesting boss because he is in many ways exactly what you want in a leader. Exceptionally smart, very hard-working, not corrupt. Generally, Chuck is not an asshole, but he's also the epitome of a politician. He wasn't about passing legislation or promoting good policies. The job was simple: get Chuck's face on TV and his name in the newspapers as often as humanly possible, because his self-image and self-worth depended on it. If Chuck woke up and read his name in the paper, he felt good about himself. If his name wasn't there, he felt like a failure. So my 2 years working for him was nonstop press conferences, press releases, speeches, op-eds, events, hearings, publicity stunts, and anything else that made Chuck feel good. It was an outstanding learning experience. In the wake of 9/11, Mike Bloomberg became mayor of New York City, and I got a job at City Hall creating the Campaign Promises Initiative, which made Mike the first, and still only, to my knowledge, politician ever to publicly report on the status of every single one of his campaign promises. We kept a running tally that indicated whether they were done, halfway done, or hadn't even started yet. This was a level of personal accountability that set Mike apart from every other politician I know of. One day, while sitting in the bullpen in City Hall, I got a call from a former colleague asking if I wanted to be the deputy governor of Illinois. "What's a deputy governor, and why are you calling me?" I asked. Turns out, back then, the deputy governor ran the state. Like literally everything: operations, budget, policy, legislation, and communications. I was 29 years old, and suddenly had the chance to manage the then 5th largest state in the country. I had to do it. When I agreed to the job, most people still thought highly of the governor. A charismatic, handsome...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?